Shalom Havraim, James Trim here. Today I want to talk to you about the Book of Enoch and why the Book of Enoch became suppressed by the rabbis and is not part of the Masoretic text. Clearly the Book of Enoch was used by the ancient Essenes, for example. We found several copies of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The so-called church fathers quoted the Book of Enoch regularly and even referred to it as scripture. So they certainly would have gotten it from the Nazarenes, the original Jewish followers of Yeshua, who were the forefathers of Gentile Christians. So there's, and in the New Testament, the so-called New Testament, the Book of Jude actually quotes the Book of Enoch verbatim in Jude 1:14 through 15. It's quoting the first Enoch, chapter 1, verse 9, and attributing it to Enoch the man. It says, "Did not Enoch seventh from Adam prophecy saying?" So unlike some that like to try and excuse or brush away the fact that it's quoting the Book of Enoch, to compare it to, say, Paul quoting from Gentile philosophers or pagan philosophers or whatnot, in fact, he's not just quoting the Book of Enoch, he's attributing it to the man Enoch, who was the seventh from Adam, and calling it prophecy. Okay. And we've covered that in other videos before. So I don't want to get too far there. There's R.H. Charles in his edition in the 1800s counted 128 references to material in the Book of Enoch in the so-called New Testament. And there's several places where the Zohar quotes the Book of Enoch and references material from the Book of Enoch without actually citing it. So how is it that the Book of Enoch has disappeared from the Jewish canon, is not part of the Masoretic text? Why is this? So before we get going, I want to encourage everybody to please donate to support these videos. We recently discovered on January 31st that we were losing a major source of income. So we need your support now more than ever. You can donate by clicking on the donate link in the video description, or by sending donations by PayPal to donations@wnae.org. Also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel so that you'll get notifications when new videos come out, and to help us break the 3,000 mark. We're at 2,000. We're at 2.9K, which means we're at 2,900 and something. We're trying to break the $3,000 mark. So please help us with that. Also, let us know what you think of our videos in the comments, and don't forget to share these videos with your friends in social media by sharing the video on social media. And remember, these videos are brought to you by you. You are our sponsors, so we need your help with that. Okay. As usual, we have handouts in the form of a PDF file that you can download. It's the link to that is in the video description down below, so you can follow along. And the first page of our handouts is from Rabbi Simeon ben Yochai in the Zohar, who is the traditional author of the Zohar. And Rabbi Simeon in the Zohar, volume 1, page 72b, he says this: "Had I been alive when the Holy One, blessed be He, gave mankind the Book of Enoch and the Book of Adam, I would have endeavored to prevent their dissemination, because not all wise men read them with proper attention and thus extract from them perverted ideas, just as lead men astray from the Most High to the worship of strange powers. Now, however, the wise who understand these things keep them secret and therefore fortify themselves in the service of their master. So the Book of Enoch is quoted actually several times in the Zohar, as I mentioned, and there are many passages in the Zohar which reference material from the Book of Enoch without actually naming it as the source. We're going to do a whole video on that in the future. But Simeon ben Yochai is telling us, or Shimon ben Yochai is telling us, that if it was up to him, he would have suppressed the Book of Enoch from the beginning. And that it's great for the sages to have this material and to make use of it, but people who are not so savvy, apparently, he believes, might be misunderstand the book, material in the book, and that he thought it might lead them astray. So that it was better that this be a secret book that the sages have, but which is not disseminated to the common people. So he lived and wrote at the very end of the first century, the very beginning of the second century, and it puts him right in the same time frame as a church father, a Christian writer named Tertullian. Tertullian, who lived between 155 CE and 240 CE, so ballpark in the same period, he wrote this, and this is our second handout, titled Tertullian at the top. But since Enoch in the same scripture has preached likewise concerning the Lord, nothing at all must be rejected by us which pertains to us, and we read that every scripture suitable for edification is divinely inspired. By the Jews it may now seem to have been rejected for that very reason, just like all the other portions nearly which tell of Messiah, or of Christ. Nor, of course, is this fact wonderful, or surprising in other words, that they did not receive some scriptures which spoke of him, whom even in person speaking in their presence they were not to receive. To these considerations is added the fact that Enoch possesses a testimony in the Apostle Jude, as this is Tertullian in his Apparel for Women, and it can be found in Fathers of the Church, Volume 3, in 1 through 3. Okay, so Tertullian, in writing at about the same time period that Shimon ben Yochai said, the Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, hey, if it had been up to me, I'd suppress the Book of Enoch. He says, hey, the rabbis, or the Jews, now seem to have rejected this book. And he gives the reason that it speaks so clearly of Yeshua as the Messiah as the reason. And Simeon ben Yochai in the Zohar gave the reason being that it might, quote, lead men astray from the Most High to the worship of strange powers. So they're saying something very similar here. At about the same time period, we have one Jewish scholar and one Christian scholar, both saying something very similar. So now I want to turn to our next handout, that's titled Daniel Boyarin. He wrote a book just a few years ago. In fact, let's see, what's the copyright on this book? 2012. So, a little over 10 years ago, titled The Jewish Gospels. Great book. I don't agree with everything in it, don't get me wrong, but it's an excellent book. And Daniel Boyarin is a top scholar, and he's been called one of the 3 greatest rabbinic scholars in the world. So Boyarin says, quoting from his book, page 1, and then I'll skip to something on pages 5 through 6. If there is one thing that Christians know about their religion, it is that it is not Judaism. If there's one thing Jews know about their faith, it's that it's not Christianity. If there is one thing that both groups know about this double knot, it's that Christians believe in the Trinity and the incarnation of Christ, the Greek word for Messiah, and that Jews don't, and that Jews keep kosher and Christians don't. He goes on to say, if only things were that simple. In this book, I'm going to tell you a very different story. A story of a time when Jews and Christians were much more mixed up with each other than they are now. When there were many Jews who believed in something quite like the Father and the Son, and even in something like the incarnation of the Son in the Messiah, and when followers of Jesus kept kosher as Jews, and accordingly a time in which the difference between Judaism and Christianity just didn't exist as it does now. This is pausing from his words now. That was from page 1 of his book. And realize this, he's an Orthodox Jew, an Orthodox Jewish scholar. He's talking about the era that we would be talking about as the Nazarenes, the original Jewish followers of Yeshua. Okay, skipping to then pages 5 and 6 of his book, he goes on to say, while by now almost everyone, Christian and non-Christian, is happy enough to refer to Jesus the human as a Jew, I want to go a step beyond that. I wish us to see that Christ too, the divine Messiah, is a Jew. Christology of the early ideas about Christ is also a Jewish discourse, and not until much later an anti-Jewish discourse at all. Many Israelites at the time of Jesus were expecting a Messiah who would be divine and come to the earth in the form of a human. Thus, the basic underlying thoughts from which both the Trinity and the Incarnation grew are there in the very world into which Jesus was born and which he was first written about in the Gospels of Mark and John. In parentheses, it puts 1 through 2, referring to the first 2 chapters of John, apparently. Okay, so Daniel Boyarin is basically acquiescing that the original Jewish followers of Yeshua believed in the deity of Messiah, but not only that the original Jewish followers of Yeshua, but actually the Jewish vein from which they arose before Yeshua was even born was anticipating a divine Messiah. And this is an astounding admission from an Orthodox Jewish scholar. Of course, in my opinion, he uses the term Christian too loosely here. And as I said, I would say that this would be talking about the original Jewish followers of Yeshua. So in this book, in Boyarin's book, he's actually got an entire chapter on the Book of Enoch. Chapter 2. The Son of Man in 1st Enoch and 4th Ezra, other Jewish messiahs of the 1st century. I don't know if you can see it there. So he's got a whole chapter on the Book of Enoch. And this is what he says about the Book of Enoch. On page 175, he says that the Book of Enoch, quote, makes extensive use of the term Son of Man to refer to refer to a particular divine human redeemer figure. And Boyarin says this exhibits, quote, many of the elements of the Christ story. He says this is all on page 75. And then on page 76, the next page, he says, this book provides us with our most, talking about the Book of Enoch, our most explicit evidence that the Son of Man as a divine human redeemer arose by Jesus' time. In other words, before the time of Yeshua, this concept already existed. And then he goes on to conclude on page 77, and I quote, what we learn from this is that there was controversy among Jews about the Son of Man long before the Gospels were written. Some Jews accepted and some rejected the idea of a divine Messiah. The similitudes, that's a portion of the Book of Enoch, are evidence for the tradition of the interpretation of the Son of Man as such a divine person. The Son of Man reference obviously in Daniel chapter 7. As such a divine person. The tradition that fed into the Jesus movement as well. It is only centuries later, of course, that this difference in belief would become the marker and touchstone of the difference between two religions. Then he goes on to say, in the Book of Enoch, this figure is a part of God as a second or junior divinity. He may even be considered a son alongside the Ancient of Days, whom we might begin to think of as the Father. Although the Messiah designation appears elsewhere also, it is in Enoch 48 that the similarities of the gospel ideas about Jesus are pronounced. He then goes on to quote from 1st Enoch, the Book of Enoch, chapter 48. And so I'm going to interject here my own translation of chapter 48 of the Book of Enoch, but you can follow along with any translation of chapter 48, including the one he gives in his book. So chapter 48, and I'll just read the whole chapter. It's only 10 verses. So one of the things about the Book of Enoch is there are a lot of short chapters in it. So verse 1, in that place I saw the fountain of righteousness, which was inexhaustible, and around it were many fountains of wisdom, and all the thirsty drank of them, and were filled with wisdom, and their dwellings were with the righteous and set apart and the chosen. And at that hour, that Son of Man was named in the presence of Yahweh of Zavaot, or Yahweh of Hosts, and his name before the Ancient of Days. Yea, before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of the heaven were made, his name was named before Yahweh Zavaot. He shall be a staff to the righteous, whereon to stay themselves and not fall. And he shall be the light of the Gentiles, and the hope of those who are troubled of heart. All who dwell on earth shall fall down and worship before him, and will praise and bless and celebrate this with song Yahweh Zavaot. And for this reason has he been chosen and hidden before him, before the creation of the world and forevermore. Verse 7, and the wisdom of Yahweh Zavaot has revealed him to the set apart and the righteous, for he has preserved the lot of the righteous, because they have hated and despised this world of unrighteousness, and have hated all its works and ways in the name of Yahweh Zavaot, for in his name they are saved. And according to his good pleasure has it been in regard to their life. Verse 8, in these days, downcast in countenance shall the kings of the earth have become, and the strong who possess the land, because of the works of their hands. For on the day of their anguish and affliction, they shall not be able to save themselves. Verse 9, and I will give them over into the hands of my chosen. A straw in the fire, so shall they burn before the face of the set apart. As lead in the water shall they sink before the face of the righteous, and no trace of them shall any more be found. Verse 10, and on the day of their affliction there shall be rest on the earth, and before them they shall fall and not rise again, and there shall be no one to take them with his hands and raise them, for they have denied Yahweh Zavaot and his anointed, and his Messiah. The name of Yahweh Zavaot be blessed. So here's what Daniel Boyarin, Orthodox Jewish scholar, says on page 80 of his book, The Jewish Gospels, which is right here. First of all, we find the doctrine of the pre-existence of the Son of Man. He was named even before the universe came into being. Second, the Son of Man will be worshipped on earth. Quote, all who dwell on earth will fall down and worship before him, and they shall glorify and bless and sing hymns in the name of the Lord of spirits. Third, and perhaps most important of all, in verse 10, he is named as the Anointed One, which is precisely the Messiah. Hebrew, Mashiach, or Christ. Greek, Christos. It seems quite clear that many of the religious ideas that were held about the Christ who was identified as Jesus were already present in the Judaism from which both the Enoch circle and the circles around Jesus emerged. So Daniel Boyarin is telling us that, first of all, that there was a Judaism in which recognized Jesus, Yeshua, as the Messiah before Christianity came about. And he says that this was closely associated with the same Judaism in which the Book of Enoch was alive and well, and that it was out of this Judaism that the Jesus movement, is, if you will, the Yeshua movement, the Nazarenes, arose. Okay. Daniel Boyarin then goes on to cite 1 Enoch chapter 69, verses 26 through 29. I will again read from my own translation, but you can use any. Verse 26, and there was great joy among them, and they blessed and glorified and extolled, because the name of that Son of Man had been revealed to them. And he sat on the throne of his glory, and the sum of judgment was given unto the Son of Man, and he caused the sinners to pass away and to be destroyed from off the face of the earth, and those that have led the world astray. With chains shall they be bound, and in their assemblage place in the destruction shall they be imprisoned, and all their works vanish from the face of the earth. Verse 29, and from henceforth there shall be nothing corruptible, for that Son of Man has appeared and has seated himself on the throne of his glory, and an evil shall pass away before his face. And the word of that Son of Man shall go forth and be strong before Yahweh Zavaot. That's 1 Enoch chapter 69, verses 26 through 29. On page 81 of his book, Daniel Boyarin says concerning these verses, he says, "Hear, the Son of Man is clearly occupying his throne of glory, seated perhaps at the right hand of the Ancient of Days. It is hard to escape the conclusion that the Son of Man is a second person, as it were, of God. And all the functions assigned to the divine figure called one like a Son of Man in Daniel 7 are given to this Son of Man, who is called, as we have seen, the Christ, or in other words, the Messiah. So here we have an Orthodox Jewish scholar who has admitted that the beliefs of the original followers of Yeshua concerning the Messiah were already Jewish ideas long before the time of Yeshua, and that the best evidence for this fact is the text of the Book of Enoch. So now, taking into account what this Orthodox Jewish scholar, Daniel Boyarin, has said, it makes perfect sense what Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says in the Zohar when he said, "Had I been alive when the Holy One, blessed be He, gave mankind the Book of Enoch and the Book of Adam, I would have endeavored to prevent their dissemination, because not all wise men have read them with proper attention, and thus extract from them perverted ideas, such as lead men astray from the Most High to the worship of strange powers. Now, however, the wise who understand these things keep them secret, and therefore fortify themselves in the service of their master." Ben Yochai was saying that readers of the Book of Enoch might come to a conclusion which he would take issue with, the same conclusion that Daniel Boyarin is pointing out in the Book of Enoch. And Shimon ben Yochai is saying that his interpretation is that's causing them to worship, quote, strange powers. In other words, the idea that the Messiah was the Son, and this idea of the deity of Messiah that is implicit in the Book of Enoch was something that he was concerned about, and therefore discouraged the dissemination of this book amongst the common people, and thought that it should be something that the sages have and make, like himself, and make proper use of. But he's concerned that the common man, the common Jewish people, might be led astray by this book. And this leads us again what Tertullian, the Christian church father, said at about the same time that the Jews had in the past used this book, but were now rejecting it, and they were rejecting it because of what it said about the Messiah. He says, quote, by the Jews it may now seem to have been rejected, but not in the past, for that very reason, just like all other portions nearly which tell of Messiah. So the Book of Enoch has a great testimony of the Messiah, and it tells us that the concept of the deity of Messiah pre-existed even before Yeshua was born in Judaism. And the branch of Judaism that maintained that belief was the Yeshua branch and the Book of Enoch branch, which makes sense because there's 128 references to the material in the Book of Enoch in the so-called New Testament, at least. And because Jude, or Yehuda, chapter 1, verses 14 through 15, quotes the Book of Enoch, 1 Enoch chapter 1, verse 9, and attributes it to the man Enoch, not just the Book of Enoch, but the actual prophet Enoch, and refers to it as prophecy. So there's no doubt that the original followers of Yeshua were Book of Enoch users, and had come from a branch of Judaism that was using the Book of Enoch. This is why the rabbis ceased to use the Book of Enoch, at first only amongst the sages, and eventually really not even that. So because of what the Book of Enoch teaches about the Messiah, and this is admitted by no less a source than one of the great rabbinic scholars of our time, Daniel Boyarin, who actually delves into the Book of Enoch in his book on the subject of what he calls the Jewish Gospels. So Shimon ben Yochai in the Zohar, Tertullian, and Daniel Boyarin, the modern Orthodox Jewish scholar, are all basically singing the same song and telling the same story. It all fits together. That the Book of Enoch wasn't included in the Masoretic text and ceased to be used in Rabbinic Judaism because of what it taught about the Messiah. At first, they wouldn't. Shimon ben Yochai didn't deny that it was a important text, just that he was concerned that the common man might misunderstand it and be drawn into worshiping, quote, strange powers. All right. I want to once again encourage you to please donate to support these videos. Where do you find this kind of material? Well, you find it here, and it's supported by people like you. We recently discovered that we were losing a major source of income, so we need your donations now more than ever. You can send donations by PayPal to donations@wnae.org, or you can click on the donate button in the video description. Also, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you'll get notifications of more videos as they come out. And of course, let us know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to share these videos on social media with your friends on social media. Until next time, Shalom.